Okay, so I wanted to go back and revisit this example we were working on in class today when I was making some arithmetic errors, just to make sure we're fully clarified. We have this reamer that has a total length of 4.25 inches, and it tapers a total of 0.130 inch. And for each of these amounts of taper in length A, we want to determine what the length of that piece A would be equivalent to. So the first thing we have to do is to determine the proportion of the taper that is covered. So in part A, we're told that the amount of taper in length A is equivalent to 0.030 inch. That is out of a total of 0.130 inches in taper. So if we convert that to a fraction by dividing 0.030 by 0.130, we get, when we change our answer to a fraction, we get 3/13. So basically we see if the amount of taper in this length A is only 0.03 inch, that's 3/13 of the total amount of taper. So now what we have to do, and we've got to recognize that that is the part divided by the whole. We're going to use that proportion here to determine the length of part A. So we're going to take the part over the total and set it equal to the part over the total in terms of the length, not in terms of the taper. So the part is A, that's what we don't know. The total is 4.250. So now to find A, we can cross multiply. We'll take the 3 times the 4 1/4, and it will be equal to 13 times A. So 3 times the 4 1/4 is 1 cross product, and that will equal the 13 times the A, which is the other cross product. To solve for A, we have to divide both sides of our equation by 13, and A will be alone. And we find that in part A here, piece A would be just a little less than an inch. It's actually 0.98 inch. Now that should make sense because 3/13 is the proportion of the total taper, which is about 23%. 23% of 4.25 is a little bit less than 1/4 of the total distance. So if you divide 4.25 by 4, 1/4 of the total distance is 1.0625 inches. This should be a little bit less, and 0.98 inches is a little bit less. Now for part B, the difference is that the amount of taper in length A isn't 1.030 inch, but rather it's 0.108 inch. So this 0.030 is going to change to 0.108. And to figure out the proportion of the total amount of taper, we'll need to divide that by the total amount of taper. So if we divide 0.108 by 0.130, we'll have 108 over 130, which could be reduced, but doesn't have to be. So 108 over 130. There's the part over the whole in terms of the taper. So notice that I changed that part over the whole for the taper to 108 over 130 in my proportion as well. and I set it equal to, once again, the length of the part over the length of the total. So that would be A over 4.25. When we cross multiply, one cross product will be 108 times 4.25, and that will equal the other cross product, which will be 130 times A. And once again, to get the A alone, we'll have to divide both sides of that equation by 130. When we do that, we find that the length of A is equivalent to 3.53 inches. Now that should seem reasonable because 108 over 130 is about 83%, as we said today in class. About 83% of 4.25 is about 3.53 inches. So the length of A here in part B would be 3.53 inches. If we move on to part C, in part C, the length of the taper is 0.068. So instead of it being 0.108, it is 0.068. What part of the entire taper is that? Well, I need to divide the 0.068 by the entire taper length, which is 0.130. And that would give me 68 over 130. So it's a bit more than 50%. If you divide 68 by 130, you get 52%. So now we're going to take that part over the whole again, not 108, but rather 68 over 130. And we're going to set it equal to the part over the total in terms of the length, A over 4.25. So our cross products have to be equal again, so 68 over 68 times 4.25 has to equal 130A. To get rid of the 130 with the A, we have to divide both sides by 130. So if we take 68 times 4.25 and divide by 130, we get the length of A to be equal to about 2.22 inches, which we see is a little bit more than half of the 4 1/4 inches of the total length of the reamer, which is reasonable because our proportion, 68 over 130, was a little more than half. It was about 0.52. In D, the difference is that our taper, amount of taper in length A, is 0.008. So that's going to be a fraction of the total, 0.130. So 0.008 over 0.130 is equivalent to, move the decimal 3 places to the right for each of those numbers, the one on top and the one on the bottom. That's equivalent to 8 over 130. It's a very small fraction of the total amount of taper, which means it will be a small fraction of the total length of the reamer. So we're going to take that 8 over 130 and we're going to set it equal to the part over the whole in terms of the length, which is again A over 4.25. If we cross multiply, the 8 is multiplied by the 4.25. The A is multiplied by the 130. Again, we need to divide by 130 on both sides to get A. And we find that the length of A is a very small part of the total length of 4 1/4 inches. It's only 0.26 inch. So I'm going to leave part E for you to do on your own, just for verification that this is in fact making sense. When you do this on your own, you should find that the proportion of the taper described in 0.093 inch is about is 93 over 130, and that is equivalent to a length of part A of 3.04 inches.